Hi YouTube. This is my first ever video. It's one that I've been thinking about doing for a while. I'm doing a video on lessons learned from Duracoating. For any of you who have Duracoated, you may already know some of the things that I'm going to talk about, but I want to bring this from my own perspective. For myself, I was never any kind of a painter. I never had any experience painting cars or anything like that. In fact, I always tell my wife one of the scariest things she could ever see is me with a paintbrush in my hand. As such, when I learned about Duracoating, I actually learned about it at the NRA annual meeting about a year and a half ago. And as for someone that prides themselves in their firearms knowledge and being up to date on all the new things in firearms, I guess it was a little surprising that I hadn't heard of Duracoating until that time. In talking to the people from Lauer Custom Weaponry, I became intrigued at the idea of being able to paint my firearms, coat them, make them rust resistant, and also to be able to give them some breakup, some camouflage. One of the various hats I wear is I'm a law enforcement sniper. So the idea of being able to camouflage my firearms, have them blend with the environment a little bit better, was something that was important to me, and I thought this was something that I could do with the Duracoat that would be very functional, as well as protecting my firearms. Previously, the first rifle that I'm going to show you in a minute was one that I had done with Beauflage, which is sort of a removable spray paint. It's not tremendously durable, but it was better than just having an all-black rifle. The Beauflage did its job. It helped the rifle blend with the environment, but it really, when you were up close, never looked very good. In fact, it looked pretty bad. So when I decided to start my Duracoat projects, I decided to start with my precision rifle, my work rifle, and try to give it a little bit more of a breakup with a woodland pattern. And some of the problems I ran into are what I'm going to go into in just a couple of minutes here. The first thing I'll tell you as far as a lesson learned is don't start out with a firearm that's important to you for your very first Duracoat project. Duracoat is purportedly a simple process, and really it is, but simple doesn't necessarily mean easy. There's quite a bit of work that goes into doing a good Duracoat job, and it's also very time consuming, especially when you get into camouflage patterns. As I said, I decided to do my work rifle, and I went down to the local hardware store, again, knowing nothing about painting, and I watched a couple of Duracoat videos on YouTube, and I thought, okay, this should be fairly simple, but I do need to get myself a spray gun. This was my first mistake. The spray gun that I purchased was this one right here. And it looked like the ones used in the video. I thought it should be just fine and dandy. I had no idea that there are different size nozzles for the different spray guns. This one has something like a 4mm nozzle or some such thing. So I got my Duracoat. I also went out and bought a small air compressor. And when all the supplies arrived, I thought, hey, I'm in business. So I got my rifle ready. I proceeded to disassemble it, degrease it, and get it ready for Duracoating. Problem was, when my first color that I sprayed on the rifle was flat black. And through this particular spray gun, the stuff came out way, way, way too heavy. In fact, by the time I got done, my rifle had runs and drips. It was literally dripping off the rifle onto the floor, and it looked awful. And I was pretty much terrible. So in an absolute panic, I called Lauer Custom Weaponry. And one thing I'll say is their customer service is outstanding. You call the 800 number, I got a hold of someone right away, told them what had happened. They immediately told me to get some lacquer thinner and clean off all of the black Duracoat that I had put on there. And they told me to hurry because if it started to dry and harden, it was going to end up being permanent. So I went through probably an entire can of lacquer thinner trying to clean off all of that black Duracoat, and basically I got it all off, fortunately. And then I had to restart the entire project by again degreasing the rifle and trying to get it all ready to go again. So consequently, the lesson learned from that whole fiasco was to use the right tools for the job. Since that time, I've acquired the spray gun on the right-hand side that I've used for several firearms. At this point, I've done 5 or 6 long guns with Duracoat. I've also recently done my first handgun, and I've gotten progressively better at it. And one of the big things was to make sure I was using the right tools. The airbrush right here, I also acquired a while back. I've not used that yet. I'm sure I will be using it in the future. But the spray gun has been doing a good job, although there's been a learning curve with that as well, which I'll get into in a little bit. On the day of my disaster with the rifle, I got on the phone after I figured out what to do to clean off the Duracoat, and I got one of the inexpensive airbrushes from Lauer on the way to me. The very first one I got was dead on arrival. It would not work at all. Called them back up on the 800 number. They sent a second one that more or less did work. The biggest problem with that second airbrush was the little hose kept popping off of it that secures it to the air compressor, and I had to try to hold that on as I was spraying the Duracoat, and that was kind of a pain. But otherwise, the thing worked. And when I put the first coat of paint on the rifle, it was all green. Green was the biggest color I used. And I put it on, I applied it, I let it set for the recommended 2 hours that Lauer says. Then I applied my templates, and I started to apply the other colors. And what happened is when I pulled the templates off, I had a lot of the underlying Duracoat come off. And this was again causing me a great deal of angst because the rifle was turning out looking like crap. This brings me to my next lesson learned, actually 2 of them. One, surface preparation is everything with Duracoat. Take the time. I did degrease this very well, and I thought the rough texture of the original finish would hold the Duracoat without having to sand it. And I think if I had waited longer for it to dry, I probably wouldn't have had so much trouble. But only waiting 2 hours, a lot of the underlying Duracoat came off when I pulled the templates off. I think that problem was exacerbated by the fact that I also didn't quite grasp the idea of the layering that Lauer talks about with Duracoat. When I started to apply the Duracoat to this rifle, I was trying to basically make it a one-coat coverage, I guess. Rather than layering it on with thin coat after thin coat after thin coat. So not only did I have only 2 hours that I allowed the Duracoat to cure, but it was a very heavy coat of Duracoat that was trying to cure during that time. I think both of those factors together really contributed to the fact that when I pulled off the templates, a lot of the underlying Duracoat came off. I think had I layered it on, given it more time to cure, first of all, I'd had a more even coating, and secondly, it would have probably adhered to the surface of the rifle much better when I started to remove the templates than it did when I did pull them off. Even with all the problems I had, and I had to go back over and redo quite a bit of it and do some work to cover up the parts that didn't come out so well, even with all that, the camouflage breakup is very good. When I'm deployed with this rifle, if I'm in any kind of vegetation whatsoever, it really becomes very difficult to see. So as far as the effectiveness of the camouflage, that came out, or that aspect of it is very good. The other thing I'll suggest to you, if you're going to get into Duracoating, make your first project a one-color project. That will help you to learn the layering, help you to learn mixing the Duracoat, spraying it, making sure you have the right spray equipment and all that. And when you start to get into doing the camouflage patterns and those sorts of things, hopefully it'll be an easier process for you. In just a minute, we'll move over to my next project, which was the first shotgun that I did.